I'm Blob, a time traveler, and tonight I stood in the fog-drenched courtyard of a 16th century manor where the air reeked of greed and broken promises. The night was heavy, as if the stars themselves hid from the cruelty unfolding below. I was there, unseen, watching a betrayal so vile it could shatter a soul. Have you ever trusted someone, only to see them trade your heart for power? Stay with me, because if you turn away now, you'll miss a story that will burn in your memory forever. The manor stood tall, its stone walls cloaked in ivy and secrets. Torches cast flickering shadows, but the air was thick with deceit. I saw Alina, a young weaver from a nearby village, stepping into the grand hall. Her auburn hair was tied back, her eyes bright with hope despite her worn cloak. Alina had been summoned by Count Victor, illicitly for his own purposes, to weave tapestries for his court. Her hands were skilled, her spirit unbroken, but her presence in that manor felt wrong, like a lamb among wolves. Count Victor awaited her, his smile sharp as a blade. He was a man of wealth and influence, his velvet doublet gleaming with gold thread, but his eyes held a hunger that wasn't noble. "You'll work for me," he said, his voice smooth, "and your family will prosper." Alina nodded, trusting his words, unaware of the trap closing around her. Trust is a dangerous thing, isn't it? It blinds you to the shadows creeping closer. That night, Alina worked late, her fingers dancing over the loom. Victor lingered, his words dripping with false kindness. He spoke of her talent, her future, but his gaze was predatory. As she left the hall, he handed her a sealed letter promising payment for her family. "Deliver this tomorrow," he said. She clutched it, grateful, unaware it was no ordinary letter. It was a contract, a vile agreement to sell her to a distant lord as a servant, no better than a slave. Have you ever held your ruin in your hands, thinking it was hope? The next morning, the manor's gates were locked. Alina's family waited in the village, expecting coin, but instead men in dark cloaks arrived. They seized her, binding her wrists, dragging her to a carriage. The village whispered in horror, "She's been sold!" I stood in the square, my heart heavy, as Alina's cries echoed. The Count's betrayal was complete. He'd traded her freedom for gold, her dignity for power. But why? What did he gain from such cruelty? The carriage rolled toward a distant estate, Alina's fate sealed inside. Yet in the capital, rumors reached the king's ears. A young king, known for his justice, who despised the noble's greed. His shadow loomed, but would it reach her in time? I wanted to scream, to tear the contract apart, but I'm just a traveler, bound to watch time's cruel dance. Alina's eyes, though, held a spark of defiance, even as the chains tightened. If you were there, would you have fought for her? Would you have risked everything to stop the injustice? Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, would you have stood against the Count or turned away? Stay with me, because Alina's story is far from over. The carriage rattled through the fog, its iron wheels grinding against the dirt. Inside, Alina sat, her wrists bound, her auburn hair falling loose over her tear-streaked face. The 16th century night was merciless, and so was her fate. I, Blob, followed unseen, my heart heavy as I watched her. The manor's betrayal clung to her like a shadow, and the village's whispers, sold, enslaved, betrayed, echoed in the air. Have you ever felt your world collapse, knowing someone you trusted stole your freedom? Alina did, and it broke her, but not entirely. The distant estate loomed, a fortress of stone and cruelty owned by Lord Gavrin, the man who'd bought her. Her contract, penned by Count Victor's treacherous hand, marked her as property, her skill, her spirit, her life, all reduced to a price. She clutched the torn edge of her cloak, her fingers trembling, but her eyes burned with defiance. "I am no one's slave," she whispered, as if the words could break her chains. Could you hold on to hope when the world calls you nothing? In the capital, Count Victor basked in his victory. I watched him in his gilded hall, toasting with nobles, his laughter sharp and hollow. He'd gained favor with Lord Gavrin, a man whose wealth rivaled the king's. and the gold from Alina's sale lined his coffers. But his eyes darted to the shadows, as if he sensed justice lurking. He didn't know the king had heard whispers of his treachery. A young king, Alexander, whose heart burned for fairness. The court was buzzing with tension, but Victor's arrogance blinded him. How do you live with yourself after selling a soul? Alina's days in the estate were a nightmare. She was forced to weave from dawn to dusk, her hands bleeding, her spirit battered. Lord Gavrin's overseers mocked her, calling her the Count's prize. Yet she wove stories into her tapestries, images of freedom, of home, of defiance. Each thread was a rebellion, a silent cry for justice. Have you ever fought back in silence when no one else could hear you? She sent a single tapestry to the capital, hidden in a merchant's cart, hoping it would reach someone, anyone, who cared. The king received it. I stood in his chambers as he unrolled the cloth, his eyes narrowing at the woven scene. A woman in chains, a count's cruel smile, a village in despair. "This is injustice," he said, his voice low but fierce. He summoned his advisors, demanding answers. The court was divided. Some nobles defended Victor, fearing their own secrets would unravel. But Alexander's resolve was unshakable. He sent riders to the estate, a royal decree in hand. Would it be enough to save her? Then came the twist that shattered everything. As Alina worked late one night, an overseer slipped her a note, not from the king, but from Victor himself. "Your sister is next," it read. "Speak, and she joins you." Alina's heart stopped. The Count hadn't just sold her, he'd targeted her family, using them to ensure her silence. Her defiance wavered, replaced by fear. Escape might save her, but it would doom her sister. Stay, and she'd lose herself to slavery. What would you do when your freedom costs someone you love? The estate's gates loomed, and the king's riders were miles away. Alina's hands shook as she wove, her tapestry now a plea for salvation. Victor's shadow stretched across the kingdom, his greed a poison no one could escape. And what Alina learned that night would change her fate forever. Could you keep fighting, knowing the cost? Hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Alina's place? Stay tuned for the end of this heartbreaking tale. The estate's hall was cold, its stone walls echoing with the clatter of looms. Alina stood, her wrists raw from chains, her auburn hair matted, but her eyes still fierce. The 16th century dawn broke, casting a pale light on her final tapestry, a woven cry for justice. I, Blob, watched from the shadows, my heart pounding. Betrayal cuts deep, but hope can cut deeper. Could a single thread unravel a kingdom's cruelty? What would you give to reclaim your dignity? Lord Gavrin's court gathered, his laughter mocking Alina's suffering. "Weave faster," he sneered, "or your family pays." The threat of Victor's note, her sister's fate, hung over her like a blade. The nobles watched, their faces smug, believing power could silence truth. But the air was heavy with change, like a storm about to break. Have you ever stood against a tide, knowing it might drown you? The climax roared in like thunder. Hooves pounded outside and the hall's doors burst open. King Alexander stormed in, his royal guard at his side, his eyes blazing with fury. He held Alina's tapestry aloft, its woven truth undeniable. "This ends now," he declared. The nobles froze, Gavrin's face paling. The king's voice shook the room as he read the decree. "No soul in my kingdom is property." He named Victor's treachery, exposing the Count's deal to sell Alina, to trade her life for gold. The crowd gasped, their loyalty to the nobles crumbling. Gavrin tried to flee, but the guards seized him. Alina stood, trembling, as the king approached. "You are free," he said, cutting her chains himself. Her eyes met his, not with relief, but with fire. "My sister," she whispered. Alexander nodded, his riders already dispatched to her village. Victor's manor was raided that hour, his papers revealing a web of corruption. Dozens sold, lives bartered for power. The The Count was dragged to the capital in chains, his greed his undoing. But redemption isn't always sweet. Alina's freedom came at a cost. Her village shunned her, tainted by the scandal, and her sister, though safe, bore the weight of their family's shame. Alina chose to leave, taking her loom and her spirit to a new land. The king offered her a place at court, but she refused. "I weave my own path," she said, her voice steady. I watched her walk into the horizon, her auburn hair catching the sun, a symbol of defiance against a world that tried to break her. The resolution was no fairy tale. Victor and Gavrin faced justice, their titles stripped, their wealth given to those they'd wronged. King Alexander's decree outlawed such trades across the kingdom, but Alina's story lingered, a reminder that dignity can't be bought. She rebuilt her life, weaving tapestries that told of hope, of redemption, of a woman who refused to be owned. Her name became a whisper of courage, carried by those who'd heard her tale. As I watched her fade into the distance, I felt the weight of her journey. Not every injustice ends in triumph, but some spirits shine brighter than the chains that bind them. Alina chose herself, even when the world said she was nothing. What would you choose if your soul was at stake? Her story lives on, not in gold or titles, but in the quiet strength of a heart that refused to break. This is your moment. You need to subscribe to the channel right now. Smash that like button. Don't wait another second. Flood the comments with your thoughts, your theories, your heart. Would you have fought like Alina or bowed to the Count's power? And don't stop there. Share this video with at least 5 people who need to hear this story. Only true time travelers understand the weight of a soul's redemption. I'm Blob, and I've got more stories to tell, but I need you with me on the next journey through time. See you soon.